Hello, my name is Akosua and I'm the author of the book titled Back to Kukurantumi. So there are a lot of different things that led me to write poetry, but the main thing was that I had the least confidence in my ability to write poetry. I've always been a good writer and I've always enjoyed writing, but that was just essays and stories, never poetry. Even when I read it, I didn't feel as confident, and even reading it, I didn't feel like I was really understanding the concept behind it. So it wasn't until college where I studied poetry. I took my first class the end of the end of freshman year, and I completely fell in love. And then after that, I was taking a class every semester. And my work is inspired by a lot of other Black poets, specifically Black women, and my life experiences. Back to Kukurantumi is it actually started as my senior thesis project in college, and that was back in 2015, and I decided that I did want to publish that book and work on it. So I worked on it for 3 years after that and published it in 2018. I actually am working on book number 2, which will be another collection of poems. And I am working on a sort of biography nonfiction book that'll come out a little bit later. That one is going to take a little bit more time, but there are definitely more books in the future to come. One theme that is very prominent in my book is the hyphenated identity, which is basically being like, well, technically I'm second generation, but being a Ghanaian American, and my experiences in navigating through Harlem as a Ghanaian American, what that means, and the experiences that I went through, which I find very relatable, especially to those who identify as having a hyphenated identity. For example, if you're Jamaican American, Indian American, Dominican American, etc., those are all different experiences that kind of work together in the sense of having a lifestyle that is separate at home and at home versus outside. So I felt that it was important to write about that and share that because I know it's relatable, but also it's nostalgic for myself, because you don't really realize what affects you, or at least when you're a writer, or even if you write in general, you don't really realize what affects you until you see it on paper. And it's funny how the mind works, and you kind of see how it followed you into adulthood. So the meaning of the title Back to Kukurantumi is basically, I sat down with my college professor at the time, who was also my college advisor. And originally, I was just working on poems to submit every week, and then have it reviewed. And there was a theme flowing throughout, especially once I got personal with my poetry. It was clear that the message of coming across was a Ghanaian American identity, but also going back to my home through my writing. And my family lineage is in Kukurantumi, which is in Ghana, West Africa. And that's pretty much how the name of the book came about. So what's special about 134th Street between 7th and Lenox Avenue? That is where I grew up, and that is where I was raised. My parents are both from Ghana, and my dad came to the United States to study undergrad at Oklahoma University, and then um, his master's at Queens College. And he lived in Harlem while he was at Queens College, and then obviously my mom came, and then we came. Uh, and so I've been there since the beginning of my life, and I represented hard, and I'm proud to be from Harlem and to be from 134th Street. And yeah, so it's significant to me in that sense that it has been my home for so many years. A lot of people move different places, but one thing that you'll notice growing up in Harlem is that you see the same faces from your childhood to your adulthood, and there's a sense of community in that. I believe that the cover of my book reflects that, and I hope that it came across. I have the, the New York City street sign where you have 134th Street, and I have the Ghanaian flag kind of waving on that same pole, which signifies being at one place in both identities at the same time. So as I was writing and as I was collecting all of my poems and figuring out where it fit or where each poem fits, I noticed three major themes flowing throughout. And that was self-discovery and identity, love/self-love, and death. And for me, I wanted the readers to kind of follow that journey along with me in a clear way. And I felt that dividing it in three parts would be a smooth transition from one poem to the next. I didn't want it to be all over the place. And I wanted to make sure that each poem was placed where it was on purpose for a reason, and that the reader can see that I transitioned from the beginning of the poem all the way to the end of the poem, and they go along on that little journey with me. Beating Drums is actually a love poem. I've never had anyone read that poem in a more darker light, if you will. So the drums represent the woman, and it signifies making love. It's a metaphor for making love. So it's not about my mom or my dad. It's just a love poem. I have a poem called Dear Little Kim, and I am referencing the rapper, artist Little Kim. I addressed a topic some would consider taboo, but I have my opinion on it, and I wanted to share that opinion in a loving way, and I hope that it came across that way. I have a poem called I Will Tell Her, and that's basically a poem for my daughter about my father. He did pass away, and it's almost like a life lesson as well as who he was wrapped in one, but it's so short of a poem that it leaves so many questions and so many ways to unpack that poem, considering that it's addressing real life lessons, real life scenarios and situations, but also explaining to my daughter who her grandfather was in both a loving way and an ugly way. So I have letters series, if you will, flowing throughout my book. And I wouldn't say that one letter flows into the next letter, or that one letter feeds off of the next letter. But I will say that while I was writing the letters, I placed them according to what felt right and what made sense. But in no way did I write one letter and then have it influence another. I kind of just placed it on what felt right. And I have poems that rhyme, but I am not a poet that focuses on rhyming. I know early on when I was learning and working on my poetry, my poems that rhymed weren't that great. The English language is one of the hardest languages to rhyme because it doesn't have like a masculine and feminine language like most do. And so it's not like our words end the same like any other language. The words kind of flow naturally and more beautifully because they kind of end in a certain way. The English language is not like that. And so when you rhyme, it can come off as gimmicky and corny. And I found that that's kind of where my rhyming poems ended. The category that it was in was a little gimmicky and corny. So that's something that I'm actually working on, because there are some really good poems that rhyme, and then there are some that I don't find to be that great. They're just rhyming to rhyme for rhyme's sake. But yeah, I'm not really the poet that focuses on rhyming too much, but that's something that I am working on, doing more and writing more poems that rhyme. I just want to thank you again for allowing me to have this platform to answer these questions about my book, and I appreciate it. And I look forward to hearing from you again, or hearing from you soon, rather. Bye.